The China Grand Prix will be crucial for Ferrari to demonstrate the potential of the SF-25. In this video, we'll explore the circuit features, schedule, and team's preparations for the upcoming Grand Prix. But not only that, we need to see updates on the mini drag reduction system situation, and finally, we're going to do a detailed analysis on McLaren and what's working for them. Before we start, please leave a supportive like, and now let's look at everything in detail. Shanghai is a technical and complex track divided into three distinct sectors. The first sector, with long curves and the characteristic snail bend, will test Ferrari's ability to manage the temperature of the front tires, a critical aspect that caused quite a few problems last year. The compromise between rapid heating and excessive degradation will be crucial to achieving a good balance in qualifying. In the second sector, the most driven one with medium slow curves, stability and traction on exit will make the difference. Here, Red Bull and McLaren could have an advantage thanks to their ability to lower the cars without suffering particular problems related to the aspirations of the track. In Melbourne, Ferrari had to modify the ground clearance, we also talked about it in the past days, but the team plans to resolve the issue for the Chinese weekend. One of the most delicate aspects for the SF-25 will be the search for the right aerodynamic load. Ferrari paid a price in the comparison with Red Bull in the past season, specifically in this area. And Shanghai will highlight any progress. The rear wing configuration used in Australia could come in handy, but the use of a new specification to improve aerodynamic efficiency is not ruled out. In fact, the last sector is dominated by a long 0.745648 miles straight, followed by a challenging braking point, and it will be crucial to maximize efficiency at that point to achieve a good lap time. The top speed and tire degradation management in this section will make the difference, and avoiding tire overheating will be a key element for Ferrari. In short, after the difficulties in Melbourne, the Maranello team cannot afford any further missteps. The competition from Red Bull, McLaren and Mercedes is becoming more competitive, and Ferrari must prove it has found the right balance between aerodynamics, efficiency and tire management. The China Grand Prix represents a real test for the SF-25 project and for the team's ability to respond to difficulties. The sprint race format will further complicate the weekend with only a single session. Free practice before the sprint qualifiers, the work done on the simulator will be crucial to optimize the setup in a short time. Usually Ferrari has accustomed us to go very strong in the weekends, with the sprint race preparing the setup only before the simulator. This is what we have also seen in the past years. However, Ferrari is expected to a show of strength. Shanghai will be the first real test to understand if the team has the credentials to stay in the fight at the top of the championship before buying a used car. Have you ever thought about how many stories it could hide? It may seem perfect aesthetically, but hide a very shady past. Speaking of cars, on my social channels, I recommend using Car Vertical, which is also the sponsor of this video. In fact, doing a check with Car Vertical is essential before buying a used car because it saves you a lot of money. You just have to enter the chassis number or the license plate number on their site, and in a few seconds you will have a detailed report on the history of the car you want to buy. Want to know if the car has been crashed, stolen, or maybe the odometer has been tampered with? Car Vertical reveals everything to you. Look, for example, at the report of this car. It had a serious accident and the damage was so severe that they had to replace half of the car, and these details inserted in the report save you a lot of money. Don't get fooled and protect your investment with Car Vertical. Discover everything there is to know about the car you want to buy, plus using my code RASTRO20 you will get a 20% discount on every report. I leave you the link in the description in the first comment with the discount code already applied, and do a check with Car Vertical using my code RASTRO20. And I also use Car Vertical to buy my car, so I also recommend you to do it and avoid scams. That said, thanks to Car Vertical for sponsoring this video. Now back to us. In my opinion, Ferrari can perform at its best next weekend in China. As stated in previous years, Ferrari has set up their car earlier in the race weekend. With the sprint race getting it right from Friday, this is because of the simulator data, and the correlation between the simulator and the track has always given positive feedback, especially last year. It's true that this year, the car is very different, so we'll need to find that correlation again, but it's likely that Ferrari can do well this weekend in China, giving less time for opponents to optimize the setup, something that Ferrari is less good at and Red Bull is much better at, for example, so you can initially weed out who can compete at the top. One of the most discussed topics over the Melbourne weekend was the ground clearance. However, the Maranello team has said that it won't be a problem in Shanghai. The real question we all ask ourselves is whether the Ferrari SF-25 is really a car with structural limits or has simply suffered setup and adaptation problems. One of the main suspicions about the Melbourne problems concerns the need to raise the single-seater to avoid excessive plank wear. Although the team has not officially confirmed this hypothesis, it is plausible that Ferrari had to sacrifice part of its performance to comply with technical regulations. And there's also doubt about the gearbox. In fact, many say that Ferrari had to raise its car from the ground more than its competitors to avoid damaging the single-seater's gearbox. However, this does not mean that the SF-25 will suffer from the same problem on other circuits. The management of ground clearance varies from track to track and is optimized through detailed simulations before the race weekend. In addition, any changes to the car floor could help recover aerodynamic load without compromising overall efficiency. If the issue was related to the suspension, it would mean that the team has not yet found the right balance between vehicle dynamics and aerodynamics. The new pooled road scheme at the front is a bold design choice, we've talked about it, but it takes time to be fully exploited. In any case, Ferrari is working to optimize the balance of the single-seater and ensure that the ground clearance provided for by the project can actually be used. China will be a real first test to understand if the problems in Melbourne were just an isolated incident or if deeper interventions are needed. And in support of this theory of Ferrari, there's also Frederic Vasseur, who stated that China will be like starting from scratch for them. The Ferrari in Australia wasn't their true form. We anticipate a different showing in Shanghai. This is what team principal Frederic Vasseur said, who immediately wanted to quell doubts about the value of the single-seater. The team principal does not hide the difficulties that emerged in the first seasonal appointment, both from a technical and strategic point of view, but already looks ahead with determination. Shanghai represents an immediate opportunity to get the season back on track and gather clearer indications on the SF-25 after the inexplicable drop seen between Friday and Sunday in Melbourne. And Vasseur said, "We are happy getting back on track immediately because Shanghai gives us the opportunity to turn the page immediately." The track has completely different characteristics from Melbourne, and with the sprint format, there are even more points up for grabs. In fact, I recall that setup time is reduced during the sprint weekend. The teams will only have 60 minutes of free practice to enter the Parc Fermé and face the sprint qualifying and the sprint race. There will be a chance to work on the setup after the sprint race before the normal race because the Parc Fermé will reopen. However, there is actually little time to work on the setup. The work done on the Maranello simulator is crucial, especially for studying the new asphalt of the Chinese circuit. The grip's evolution will be a key factor. In fact, Vasseur emphasized that it will be crucial to discover the behavior of the new asphalt as soon as possible. The partial resurfacing carried out last year has already created some surprises, and Pirelli has warned that the behavior of the tires could change significantly over the course of the weekend. Ferrari will work on every detail to put Leclerc and Hamilton in the best possible conditions. "We will support our drivers to the fullest on a track that both particularly love," reiterated Vasseur. Shanghai therefore represents a decisive test for Ferrari, called upon to demonstrate that the problems seen in Australia do not reflect the true potential of the SF-25. But before we go to see the technical characteristics of the Chinese track, we need to make a small digression on the issue of the mini drag reduction system because Red Bull continues its battle to slow down McLaren. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile has officially tightened the test on the rear wings starting from the Medicina Grand Prix, with the aim of eliminating borderline solutions like the mini drag reduction system and reducing excessive aerodynamic flexing. A stricter parameter on Article 3.15.17 of the technical regulations will come into effect in Shanghai. With 165 pounds of vertical load applied on the main plane of the rear wing, the variation of the distance with the flap should not exceed 0.0197 inches compared to the previous 0.0787 inches. Only for the China Grand Prix, given the tight schedule, a tolerance of 0.0098425197 inches will be allowed. This is to recap the situation. In fact, for months, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile has been tightening control over wing flexions, and Red Bull is among the teams that have pushed for a crackdown. Already last year, the Milton Keynes team asked for clarification on the front wing, and in recent weeks has increased pressure on the federation also for the rear wing. Red Bull's technical director, Pierre Rocher, had already highlighted in the pre-season test the use of the mini drag reduction system by McLaren and Ferrari, reporting alleged irregularities to the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, but without having certain evidence, and this is what we contest to Red Bull. Red Bull is convinced that McLaren has exploited advanced aeroelastic solutions capable of rebalancing the car and making it more competitive. Unable to quickly copy these innovations, Red Bull has adopted an alternative strategy, pushing the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile to limit them, just as happened for the mini drag reduction system and the flexibility of the rear wings, the management of tire temperatures, the use of water in the rims. Do you remember last year outside in the brake baskets to control tire overheating and the ban on flexible front wings? In short, the Milton Keynes team is looking for any stratagem to stop McLaren, continuing to appeal to the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile to intervene to limit McLaren's own aerodynamic development. There is also suspicion that these solutions come from former Red Bull technicians who are now at McLaren, such as Rob Marshall, known for his aggressive approach to technical innovation. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile introduced a crucial innovation in evaluating the conformity of the wings. Passing static load tests no longer automatically guarantees the legality of an aerodynamic solution. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile could consider those wings irregular that change their behavior based on secondary parameters such as aerodynamic load and temperature, altering their flexibility in a way not detectable by standard tests. The Federation's intervention comes in record time and will put particular pressure on the smaller teams forced to quickly adapt their wings. Quick solutions to comply with the new directive include resin injection into the areas most subject to flexing, additional carbon layering to stiffen the structures, and the insertion of metal reinforcements on the main plane allowed only for the China Grand Prix. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile's goal is clear: to block any possible regulatory loophole before it becomes too pronounced an advantage. It remains to be seen whether this new test will really balance the performances on the track, or if McLaren will find new solutions to circumvent the restrictions. And as it wanted to show, the battle continues off the track, with Red Bull pressuring the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile to be stricter and intervene in blocking any aerodynamic innovation that goes to the limit of the regulation, and McLaren trying to get out of these loopholes. We will see during the season how this situation will evolve. Certainly Ferrari, as stated, remains outside these political battles because their car respects the regulation. But let's do a recap of the weekend in China. In fact, the times will be as follows. We have free practice 1 on Friday at 4:30 in the morning, the 8:30, the 4 in the morning, the 8, while the 8 in the morning. As already in 2024, China will host the first of the 6 sprint weekends of the season. The teams will only have 1 free practice session to find the best setup before the Parc Fermé closes, but they will be able to make changes after the sprint to optimize the car for the race. So there will be a break after the sprint race to modify the setup if a mistake was made earlier. One of the most critical aspects will also be the rapid evolution of the track. Shanghai was resurfaced in the summer of 2024 and has seen very little activity since then, which means that the initial grip will be very low and will increase progressively throughout the weekend. So it wouldn't surprise us if some teams change the setup after the sprint race due to the evolution of the track, adjusting the ground clearance of the single-seater. For the China Grand Prix, Pirelli chose the C2, C3 and C4 compounds identical to last year, but the new C2 is softer, more like a C3. Another key factor of the weekend will be the asphalt temperature. Usually in March in Shanghai, temperatures do not exceed 18 degrees. However, forecasts indicate a significant heat rise with peaks of 26 degrees expected for Saturday. Values very similar to those recorded last year in April. The race will be carried out with 1 or 2 stops, and Shanghai offers several combinations of slow and fast curves, 2 long straights with RS zones, the first of which has been extended by 82 yards compared to last year. The Shanghai weekend will also have a special meaning for Pirelli, as it will present a trophy dedicated to the poleman of the spring qualifying to celebrate the milestone of 500 Grand Prix in Formula 1, which the Italian supplier will reach in Zandvoort. However, we need to look in detail at how the reference team at the moment, namely McLaren, will tackle the China Grand Prix, because it is important to understand the strengths of the reference team at this moment in Formula 1. In Shanghai, McLaren will have to choose between two setup approaches: a new rear wing specification to optimize top speed on the long straights, and an adaptation of the aerodynamic package with a different beam wing to increase vertical thrust and improve overall balance. The MCL-39 amazed everyone in Melbourne with its exceptional balance, surpassing expectations. Despite some difficulties encountered in pre-season testing, the team managed to find the right compromise between rear rigidity and front stability. The goal in Shanghai is clear: to prove that the Australian victory was not a fluke and to consolidate the role of leading force among the teams. But what is the real secret of the MCL-39? In the paddock, some believe that the real secret of the MCL-39 is not just in the wings, but another key element: the corner. In fact, in addition to the controversy over the flexible wings that we have already discussed, the attention of rival engineers has shifted to the front brake cooling system of the McLaren,
an area
that the Woking team has tried to protect from prying eyes during the tests in Bahrain. In fact, several engineers have identified a distinctive feature in the design of the MCL-39. There is a controlled airflow inside the brake basket that prevents the heat generated during braking from radiating towards the rim and therefore to the tires. There is an innovative fresh air gap that creates a sort of insulating cushion between the brake heat and the tire, maintaining a more stable temperature across the entire width of the rim. There is also an increased air intake compared to the MCL-38, with an increase in the outflow to improve the thermal control of the tires. This solution allows McLaren to maintain a constant tire temperature, preventing degradation while ensuring a quick trigger of the operating window. Andrea Stella, McLaren's team principal, said they have worked to improve the aerodynamics and tire behavior. The competitiveness shown in the race surprised us, not so much for the goals we had set, but for the extent of our advantage. And now we have to wait for how much the corner development area, therefore the circle and the cooling of the brakes, requires time and timid investments from the opponents, particularly from Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes. So be careful that the secret of McLaren could be precisely in the cooling of the front axle, which is a hot topic, and we will also see in China if it will give reasons for discussion. But now we have to talk about Zak Brown's statements on the calendar. Zak Brown stated Formula 1 calendar, 20 fixed races and 8 in rotation to touch more countries. Brown proposes keeping 24 GPs but rotating some to showcase 28 countries alternating every 2 years. We have reached the limit with 24 races, we can't increase them,
he stated.
Zak Brown. But we could think of a rotation system, 20 fixed GPS and 8 that change every 2 years. This approach would allow us to cover 28 markets while keeping the total number of races the same, enabling further growth of the sport. In 2024, we saw 7 different winners in Formula 1, and so even Zak Brown himself stated it's the most competitive Formula 1 he has ever seen. I've been following this sport since the 80S, and I remember times when everything was very predictable. Last year it wasn't like that, and I believe that in 2025 we might see an even greater number of different winners. We know that Dominicali will remain Chief Executive Officer of Formula 1 until 2029, and Zak Brown trusts him to manage Formula 1 to the best. And do you think the solution of having 20 fixed races and 8 in rotation is a smart solution for the future of Formula 1? Let me know your opinion on all the topics we covered in the video. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos on this channel. I provide you with daily updates on Formula 1 news, particularly those related to Ferrari. I'll leave you with some related videos. See you in the next video from Rasaduto.